All right, guys, here we go. So before we were doing radical functions, now we have moved on to exponential functions. So I want you first to pause your video, go ahead and copy everything that you see here onto the notes, and then we will go from there and talk about it and what everything means. Okay, so first let's talk about your parent function. So yes, this teeny tiny x right here, that is an exponent, okay? So it'll be a number to an exponent. That's what your parent function will look like. Now, if b is bigger than 1, the function is an exponential growth and is increasing. That also means it's going up from left to right. Okay? Now, if b is less than 1, the function is an exponential decay and it's decreasing. That also means it will be going down from left to right. Now, an asymptote. I don't think that y'all have really talked about asymptotes yet. It's a line which the graph gets closer to but never crosses. This is really important. So it's just going to look on your graph like it keeps getting closer and closer and closer, but it's never actually going to touch it or cross it. So for the first time you're seeing this, I just want to walk you through everything that you can expect, and then we will do it together. So I know this looks a lot like your radicals that we discussed last chapter, and it's going to be the same idea. So as far as graphing your function, you are always, for right now, you are always going to use -2, -1, 0, and 1, and 2 for your x values, okay? So once you do that, you're going to do 2 to the -2, okay? That's 1 over 2 squared, which is 1 over 4, right? That's how you get that 0.25. All right, so look at what we did again. Let me erase that because it's kind of hard to see. We took that -2 right here. We plugged it into our equation right here. Now, using our exponent rules, that means it gets bumped to the bottom underneath 1, and then 1 over 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so 1 over 4 is 0.25. It's probably going to be a little easier if you have everything in decimal form when you're graphing it, okay? So then, the same thing. You're going to use the -1 that's next. Our 2 is our base, so it stays the same. So 2 to the -1 is 1 over 2 to the first power, which is 1 over 2, which is 0.5. So that's where all of these numbers right here, your y values, are coming from. It's just from plugging these x values into the x in your function. So if you want to, you can go ahead and plug them in and make sure that you're getting the numbers in your y column before you move on. Okay, so once you have made your XY chart right here, then we are going to graph our exponential function. So go ahead and -2.25. So -2.25. It's so close to your x-axis, and I'm actually kind of impressed that I was able to get it that close and not hit it. So, and then -1.5, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 4, and if you put 3 in, it would go up here. So then we just go ahead and connect everything. Now, this is your asymptote, okay? That I'm going to erase it because it's drawn way better on here. It's easier to do on paper than the stylus. So this is your asymptote at x equals 0 right here. Everybody see that on the x-axis? This line, so I'm going to draw it to where you can kind of see it. Okay, that is your asymptote where you see how the graph comes down, but it never really touches it. So that's where your graph is kind of ending. So as it goes further left on the x-axis and you have these negative x values, your y values are going to get closer and closer to the x-axis, but they're never going to be 0. Okay, so now let's talk about all of our things over here. It's almost the same with the exception of asymptote and y-intercept. Okay, so domain, remember domain is your x values, range is your y values. So if you look, Your domain is going to cover all real numbers. It goes all the way across the x values. It keeps going this way, and then as it goes up, it's still going to the right. So that's why our domain is all real numbers. Now, our range, look at our range, that's y values. It does not hit 0, right? But our graph is above 0, so our range is y is greater than 0. Now, in behavior, so as x approaches positive infinity, remember positive infinity is this way on the x-axis. Okay, what is happening to your y? Your y is going up. So that means as x approaches positive infinity, f of x, or your y, is also approaching positive infinity. If it was going down, then that means it would be negative infinity. Now, let's look at another one. As x approaches negative infinity, which way is negative infinity? It's the left, right? As it's approaching the left, what did we say that it was doing? It was getting closer and closer to 0. So as x approaches negative infinity, your y, your f of x, approaches 0. Okay, on exponential functions, then it's going to be approaching some sort of asymptote. So be on the look for that. Now, your y-intercept, it's the same thing as it meant when we first talked about y-intercept. Just where your graph crosses your y-axis. Where does it cross your y-axis? Right here at y equals 1. I didn't do as good on that one. There we go. Finally made it over there. Y equals 1. So our ordered pair where it crosses the y-axis is 0, 1. And finally, your asymptote, we've already talked about that it is on the x-axis, which is where y equals 0. So that is where your asymptote will be, where it's y equals 0. You're always going to write your asymptote equal to y. Okay, so that's a quick little overview of that. Remember, like I said with the radicals, you're just reading your graph. And this whole part that I have outlined in the green, okay, you were just reading your graph to get these answers. So don't get overwhelmed with that. The big thing is make your XY chart first, graph it. Graph it. By all means, use your calculator, y'all. Remember, I'm all about work smarter, okay? So use your calculator. Make sure your graph on your calculator matches what you got with your XY chart, and then go through and fill out the chart by the green. So we're going to do one together next. Okay, guys, so remember the first thing we said to do was to make an XY chart. So we're going to do that over here. And think about what values did I tell you to put in x every single time? -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So now you're going to plug those in. So remember 3 to the -2 power means 1 over 3 squared, which is 1 over 9. Okay, 1 over 9 is 0.1 repeating. Okay, remember we talked about to use it as a decimal in your XY chart. So now we are going to do the same thing for the next one. So we have 3 to the -1 power, which is 1 over 3 to the first power, which is 1 over 3. So think, what is that as a decimal? Yes, it is 0.3 repeating. Now I want you to go through and do 0, 1, and 2. Pause your video, and when you're finished, unpause it and check your answers. Okay, so here's what you should have done when you plugged in 0, 1, and 2 for x, or what you should have gotten. So remember, anything to the 0 power is 1. So 3 to the 0 will always be 1. 4 to the 0 will always be 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. So now we are going to plot these points and go ahead and graph our exponential function. So we're going to start with -2.1. So we're barely going up on the y-axis right there. -1.3, 0, 1, 1, 3, and 2, 9. Okay, so it's a little harder to do with a stylus, so just bear with me. And now let me attempt to give you a pretty function graph. All right, and so remember we said that it would approach 0 but not cross it, okay? Because our asymptote is right here on the x-axis. So this is what our graph should look like. You don't necessarily have to do it in 2 colors. I'm just trying to do that to help you see the difference. So now we just use our graph that we have already done to answer the questions on the right. So first, your domain. What is your domain? So your x values, again, going all the way from left to right, it's covering all of it. So your domain is all real numbers. Your range, we look at our range. What was our range? Our range is our y values. So our y's are greater than 0 because our asymptote's at 0. We never cross that, and everything's above 0. Okay, now let's look at end behavior. As we approach the right, okay, so as x approaches positive infinity, that's to the right. Correct? So, what is our y doing, or what is our f of x doing? It is going up, which means our end behavior, f of x, is also approaching positive infinity because it's going up. Now, as x approaches negative infinity, as it goes to the left for negative infinity, what is happening? It's approaching 0, right? So, that is what we're going to put for f of x. It approaches 0. Now, our y-intercept, here we see our y-intercept is what again? 0, 1. And finally, our asymptote, remember we write it as y equals, and it is y equals 0 because it is on the x-axis. All right, guys, so now let's look at exponential decay. It's the exact same process, but you'll see instead of going up from left to right, we're moving down from left to right, and that is what makes it exponential decay. So, the big difference, like we talked about in the notes on the first slide in the very beginning of the video, is that b is less than 1. So, anytime b is a fraction, then it will be exponential decay. So, first off, you make your XY chart, just like we did over here. Then we graph our points, and the same thing. Like I said, you look through your domain, so you look at your X values. From left to right, it keeps going. There are arrows on both sides, so it's going to be all real numbers. For your Y values, or your range, again, we're still approaching 0 just on this side. Everybody see that? So, y is still greater than 0 for your range because over here we keep coming up. So we still get bigger on those y values. So it's greater than 0. Now for end behavior, this is where again we are just reading our graph and putting down what we see. So for end behavior, we look as x approaches positive infinity. So as it goes this way, what is happening with our graph? We're getting closer and closer to 0 right here. So f of x is going to approach 0. Now, as x approaches negative infinity, so as x approaches the left this time, what is happening to our graph? It's going up. So, once you see that, and it's going up, that means that it is approaching positive infinity. Finally, we look at our y-intercept and our asymptote, okay? Our y-intercept is still hitting the y-axis at 0, 1, and you can also see that in your xy chart right here. And then your asymptote is also y equals 0 still because it is right here on the x-axis. All right, guys, so that is it for exponential functions for this video. So this is just graphing them and putting your, making your XY chart and then filling in the domain, range, and behavior, just getting familiar with the functions and the way they look on the graph. So, if you have any questions, let me know. go ahead and complete these notes. I am going to upload the completed notes for you to look at to make sure that you're doing it correctly as you go along completing those. Your assignment is due next Wednesday, and when you upload that, then on Thursday, remember, the answer key will get uploaded for you to start going over it. Email me with any questions, any specific questions. Remember, you may have to watch the video multiple times.